Hey there, and welcome to the next episode of Weapon Refine Ideas. We have a handful of units to have a look at today, including a couple of legendary heroes and the next round of Choose Your Legends characters. Now I was a little doubtful whether we get the Choose Your Legends characters this year, as they're part of Book 3, and as far as I'm aware we haven't really scratched Book 3 yet in terms of refines. But with Book 1 coming to a close, and I suppose Book 2 well on its way, I suppose there's no reason why we can't upgrade some characters that, let's be honest, are a little bit behind now. Especially with the new Choose Your Legends characters, which, compared to these old ones, it's surprising how far the game's come, even in that time. But anyway, today we're going to be having a look at all these characters, and I hope you find the video interesting and fun. And yeah, I'll be having a look at each character individually, even the two separate Ephraims, and then I'll be giving an idea as to what I think they might get as their refine. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the video, and yeah. Starting off we have Brave Olm. Now, Brave Olm came and went quite quickly in my opinion in terms of his relevance. He's a very cool unit and he does a lot of damage, but that's about it really. There are a lot of other sword units in the game, so standing out is quite difficult. The CYL Pref A skill is really nice. The problem is that other sword units that are this good typically have something like this in their special, leaving their A skill free for something like Distant Counter. CYL locks your A skill, so even if you have another special to boost your damage or sustain your health, you can't have Distant Counter, you can't have a Unity skill, you know, there's a lot of problems that arise. Hence why Refine is going to be really useful for this guy, hopefully. As far as his fodder goes, he was good until Menace skills existed. Menace skills are like a better Threaten skill. So Threat and Attack speeds are lovely, but a Menace skill would be so much nicer. As you can see with the build I made use of the Menace skills alongside Null Follow-Up, which helps because he has a lot of damage, he's got enough speed, that's what I use the Sacred Seal for, but overall, he is able to duel most enemies in the game quite successfully, and he's got quite a meaty defense stat to my surprise. He actually has plenty of bulk that he can utilize in order to duel characters effectively. And he gets a lot of stats from his weapon. He gets 5 to all stats if he's more or less on his own. So that's rather good. So moving on to his refine, I wanted to give him something that could work with his A skill and of course stand out from the crowd a little bit. So I simplified his weapon space effect so that you just have to be solo. Having to calculate how many enemies are near you and how many allies are near you is such a pain, whereas a solo skill is so much more simple. So 5 to all stats and some special cooldown charge, why not? Because whether you're using a special to heal you or to do more damage, you want to charge it nice and fast because he doesn't have cooldown -1 in his weapon, so this is useful. It also means you don't have to run Heavy Blade in the Sacred Seal slot, so you know, things like this. And the refine effect on top of this is that if you initiate combat, you neutralize effects that prevent follow-up, so on. It's a bit of a flow refresh effect, so after combat you're going to gain 10 HP. I forgot to mention that CYL damages you for 7 after combat, which is like worse than Fury 3. To account for the extra damage you get, it's the drawback. Whereas the 10 HP on this refine means that you won't be suffering so much from recoil damage. In fact, you gain a net 3 HP after combat every time, which isn't loads, but it's better than losing HP. And then of course the null follow-up attack's nice because it means you can really get into those slow tanky dragons that are quite a pain. It also gives you a fair shot against Fallen Edelgard because she has a wary fighter effects and might survive quite easily otherwise. So little things like this here and there help him deal with the current meta, but also give him a decent leg to stand on for time to come. So hopefully he gets something like this. He's actually a very cool unit, and it would be nice to see him at least usable, or stand out against what already exists. Next up we have Micaiah. Now Brave Micaiah works like most Micaiahs do. High res, high attack, and you are effective against armors and cavalry units. Big surprise there. What's nice about this Micaiah is that she gives you a way to work with your speed. Light of Dawn boosts each of your stats individually according to the debuffs on the enemy. So if the enemy has a -6 debuff in speed, you gain an additional plus 6 speed during combat, which is really nice. That creates a difference of 12 speed. That essentially gives you 40 speed base. It's quite passive and you don't realise it, but she can be quite speedy. That's without any merges. Just to quickly go over her fodder though, she has a Bond Force skill, which is lovely, but unless you're really attached to having a consistent plus 7 attacking res, you're better off waiting for something like attack res Unity to give to your unit in order to make use of the debuff to buff conversion thing, which is quite insane. Ground orders is nice though, so if you're looking to put ground orders on someone, you can go ahead and do that. But to be perfectly honest, I'd wait and see first if she gets anything good for her Refine, because even a one-off copy of her might end up being quite useful to have around. Jung's Whispers is very interesting, because it gives you a speed debuff on the opponent, which is kind of hinting towards the fact that you can use her speed and get you to be a bit creative with her builds. So what I've done is, with her merges, I gave her steady impact, because she actually has quite a lot of attack already, and I've noticed her defense is quite lacking, and then given a Mystic Boost to preserve her HP if she gets hit a few times. Now you could do a lot of things. You could run Sturdy Impact, you could run Close Counter, would be an interesting build to try, but there's so much stuff you can do here that can make use of all her stats, so patch up her def and speed, and then go to town on just about any enemy in the game. And most of the meta nowadays are cavalry and armor units, apart from the odd infantry, which often have low res anyway, so you're a mage. So there's a lot of things you can do here. Her Refine, I think, was quite simple. I gave her the debuff doubler that Gunther has, seeing how amazingly powerful that was for her. This would really help Micaiah because it improves your damage, it greatly improves that speed gap that you can create, and she's quite self-sufficient with it too because she has a preference B skill that can do that for you. So yeah, that's pretty much it really for Micaiah. Just something that can boost what she already does, but make her more consistent and proficient at it, to the point where she's actually quite scary to come against, even if she's on her own. Brave Eliwood has always been a unique type of unit because he has beast effectiveness. Even to this day there aren't enough beast killers, which is why Fallen Ezelgard has become such a problem. Brave Eliwood has a really nice offensive stat line, and he's probably been used for fodder more often than not because of his Swiss Sparrow 3. Lance cavalry units are very competitive, so standing out from this, much like with Ulm, is really difficult. Nini's Ice Lance is simple. You get 4 tool stats if you initiate, which synergizes with his Swiss Sparrow, his rally skill synergizes with the Ruse skill, and the speed opening is existing. But yeah, the effectiveness against dragons and beasts is very useful, but the beast effectiveness is what you want to look at as his unique stance. I don't think any other Lance cavalry units have beast effectiveness at all. In fact, I think even dragon effectiveness is quite unique. So for his set, I gave him Surge Sparrow, which ironically kills Brave Erica, but it really does work with him. He's an offensive Lance cavalry unit that when initiates can rack up quite a lot of damage. So Surge Sparrow acts as his healing, his sustain. Ruptured Sky works off of the enemies. Now the reason why I gave him that is because all the other skills focus on removing the def, res and speed of the opponent, but not the attack, or boosting his own bulk. Again, the reason for this is beast units often have high attack, namely Fallen Edelgard, but you've also got units like Canagus and Mordecai. Oftentimes they have quite a beefy attack stat. If not, then they're probably one-shottable anyway, because you've got high attack and you're effective against beasts. If they're not a slow, tanky, hard hitter, they're going to be a fast but more squishy character you'll probably one-shot. So this prepares for every situation. But yeah, the Canto is useful, and the Def Res Menace helps your allies. You could also give him attack speed menace. I just didn't want to reduce Ruptured Sky's effectiveness with a menace skill, but that's very much down to you if you want to do that or not. Then if we have a look at his Refine, I changed it slightly so he gets 5 to all stats rather than 4, just because it's a bit cheeky and I think that it helps with the BST difference nowadays. But I gave him a Menace Spectrum of sorts, but not the res version. This doesn't work with the build that I made for him, but most refines won't. The idea is to debuff nearby enemies across the board in stats that would be useful to you, and then couple that with the boosts of stats you give yourself, you create quite a wide stat difference. I mean, with the weapon alone, you're creating a 10 difference between your attack, your speed, and your bulk. It's really useful. To top that all off, he's also got no follow-up, because this helps him deal with, again, threats like Fallen Edelgard who block follow-ups and are just slow and annoying. So stuff like this is really useful. Again though, I don't just want to counter today's meta, because Fallen Edelgard will not last forever. But the thing is, no follow-up can prepare him for most scenarios because he relies on his speed to double. So either way, regardless of which dragons or beasts are in the meta, he should be able to fight them quite well past this point. Oddly, while Brave Camilla was always considered to be quite lackluster at the time, I feel like she stood the test of time quite well. A bit like a colourless mage, a staff unit with lots of attack and speed often does quite well, regardless of what the meta is, because you get a fire sweep effect, and no weapon triangle, and magical damage. It's like a holy trinity of useful things when in combat. She comes with a built-in Razzle Dazzle, which is lovely. Her weapon only inflicts gravity, which is probably the biggest drawback to using her. But attack speed push 4 is really useful. Wrathful Staff, like I said, is a built-in Razzle Dazzle. Restore Plus is brilliant fodder, although I wouldn't use a 5-star unit for it. I think it comes on Nana, who's a 3 and 4 star. But you have to 5-star her to use it. And then Attack Tactic's quite cheap. So the main fodder here is attack speed push 4. Wrathful Staff you can get from a lot of the limited combat manuals that come around, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. But the usage of Camilla, as you can see from the build on the right, isn't much different to what she comes with. I mean, her staff does give her a small boost to attack and speed as well, so overall you're hitting easily mid-60s, early 70s in your attack, and your speed's easily above 50. Even without merges you can reach these sorts of numbers with buffs, so she's very strong. Simple as that, really. For her refine, I decided to give her a slight boost to that attack and speed. It was +3, I made it +4, much like Eliwood. It's just a cheeky buff that makes her slightly better than before, helps with modern threats and such. But the big change here is the secondary refine effect, and this is reminiscent of Legendary Sigurd's special, where he grants a buff to all allies and also lets their movement increase. I thought, what a great contrast from putting gravity on the foes to increasing the movement of your allies. It creates a huge difference in mobility that can really change the tide of battle quite quickly, which is quite fun. I'm just imagining Camilla and her Norian buddies, most of them cavalry units of course, getting ready to strike, and then after Camilla attacks and stops them from moving, they can surround them and do all these fancy maneuvers around, so it'd be really cool. The speed +6 is just to differentiate a bit from what Sigurd has, and it's also quite handy because speed's a nice stat to get, and it's also one of the harder buffs to get most of the time. Even nowadays, speed tactic isn't the cheapest of things to get hold of, so speed's buffing skills are a bit finicky. So something like this would be nice and fun and unique, which is also something I strive for in my refines. Not always, but when I spot something of a potential, I try and create a refine that can be a little bit more interesting. But yeah, hopefully Camilla gets something cool, because with Brave Veronica already receiving her refine and being really good, it would be nice to see Brave Camilla get something equally as useful. Of course, Brave Veronica had a good start, but Brave Camilla's got a lot of potential if they just come up with something similar to this, or maybe they'll come up with something more interesting. Who knows? Now we take a step back even further in time to Male Kana. He's the Heroic Grail character this month, and as you can tell by his base kit and probably his stats, his refine is very long overdue. And if it was me, I would try and get 2 Heroic Grail characters per month from now on, because it would keep up a little bit more with the pacing of the refines. That's just my opinion though, and the main problem with Melkarn is that he doesn't come with a weapon in the first place, and his stats aren't much to show, although his mix bulk's quite nice. Water Breath's not bad either, but as far as fodder's going, there's nothing really going for him here besides maybe his sea skill. Fortify Dragons is rare enough, but at the same time it's not really that useful nowadays in my opinion. The build I gave him just kind of works as a general tank, quite useful on Ether Rays, Light Season if you've stacked up your res buffs and your HP buffs with blessings. You must also consider the fact that none of the units in this video have dragon flowers, and that's because the cost has gone up so high now that I consider it unlikely that people have invested flowers on every single unit they own. So unless Melkarn is your favourite, in which case this build will only be better, at least you can relate a bit more to the builds that I'm showing. So Lightning Breath's a staple dragon breath. It's quite useful, distant counter, lets you run a unity skill, and then with breath you get the increased special charge. Soul is a 3 cooldown, but Lightning Breath makes it 4, so it works very well with Steady Breath, which is even numbers. Null follow-up helps generally with a lot of the mages you'll fight in Ether Raids, and then Attack Res Menace is just helpful for that bit extra damage, because his attack is very much on the low side. There's not much else to say about him really, because he's very much just a generic blue dragon. So his refine, I copycatted female Karnas. I don't think they're going to make him very different to her, especially since she was a 5-star exclusive at the time. I think she might be a 4-star special focus now, but I might be wrong there. What I did was I slightly tweaked it to be a -4 penalty on the foe, rather than it being a +4 benefit to him, just to make it more Norian, I guess. And then instead of lull attack speed, I gave him lull attack res, just again to make him slightly different. But when I mean make him unique in his refine, I'm actually rather hoping that they give him something that is a little bit more creative. But it's still a fantastic refine. It's very simple, very useful, and it'll give him something he can have over the other dragons that don't have pref weapons. He is a free unit, so I wouldn't go expecting him to be insane with his refine. But that being said, you know, there's no reason why they won't give him something good. He has some Fire Emblem Fates, and while I don't want to be bitter, Fire Emblem Fates characters do tend to get the better end of refines a lot of the time, because there's a little bit of favouritism there still. That might wear off though. I mean, we're heading into almost 3 houses refine territory once we get to book 3, so who knows, they might stop giving Fates characters so much. But besides all that, it would be nice to see him get a boost regardless, and if your favourite character is Melkarn, I hope you're pleased with what he gets in the end. Coinciding with his legendary remix, we have Ephraim. Now, the beginning of 2018 was just before the meta started to accelerate a little bit faster, which is why Ephraim originally came with Sturdy Stance 2 and Fortified Def 3, and his Solar Brace skill wasn't particularly impressive. But this new remix he's about to get gives him Attack Def Solo 4, which is brilliant and allows him to act in both phases. And then Solar Brace 2 is a fantastic buff to his already existing skill, giving him immunity to guard, a Canto effect, and also the ability to recharge 10 HP after every single combat. This makes him good for almost any build you may have had him in already. Flame Sigmund is a weapon that gives you an automatic follow-up if you're on your own enough. This is just like Ulm, where it's quite a finicky thing to proc because you have to make sure there are more enemies than allies. It really developed into the solo skills we know today as a check. But back 2018 had a lot of skills like this. The build I gave him that works with all of this is Gale Force with a Heavy Blade Seal. I mean, you've got immunity to guard, so you're going to proc it quite often. The only weakness I can see in this build is the fact that the Attack Def Menace removes def points from your opponents, which is all well and good, but if you one-shot your opponent, you're not going to proc Gale Force because you need to trade blows with the opponent and hit them a second time. even with Heavy Blade, to proc Gale Force in one combat. But Canto will help you retreat if that's the case, and then you could go in again with a Dancer on your next turn. So there are ways around this, and Solar Brace 2 is the MVP skill, I suppose you could say, to all of this. I'm now going to move on to Ephraim before I go into depth with my Refine idea. But just to touch on Ephraim briefly, the original Ephraim works in a very similar way. You know, he had low speed, good defense, bad res, high attack, and his original Refine allowed him to make a follow-up attack as long as he was high on HP. And this is quite nice because if you haven't fought yet in the fight, he can deal quite a lot of damage actually, especially for a Gen 1 unit. His attack points are very impressive. Of course, his fodder is very 2017, so there's nothing really to say about it. If he was released today, he'd absolutely have a menace skill. You can see I gave him one on the right there. Again, I'm ditching speed because while it is technically redeemable on both of these Ephraims, it's a much better idea, I think, to boost your bulk and your attack and just work with the automatic follow-up and just hope they don't have null follow-up. Don't forget, you've got a whole team, so Ephraim's not going to kill everything, but he will do a lot of damage against most of the casts, regardless of their colour. Even though he's blue. Mirror Impact's quite nice because it can stop their follow-up. It's quite a nice way to give yourself an advantage. But all these sorts of skills, reducing the opponent's attack and def, allowing you to deal lots of damage. It's a very similar style, but without that special B skill, base Ephraim struggles a little bit more in today's world with his matchups. But I chose to give them a Refine that would work for both of them because it's not really... neither of them are really doing too well, so it'd be nice to give them something they can both make use of. So I actually stuck with the base effect having attack +3. I think giving everyone cooldown -1 would be a little bit excessive and boring, so I stuck with the attack +3. It's nice to have a bit more damage. 19 might weapon is very strong. And then of course I changed it to a solo skill. Much easier to proc the skill's follow-up attack. -6 attack and def helps with all the builds that they all do, and of course guaranteed follow-up, so that's all well and good. Very simple, clean Refine there. And then the secondary thing is to reduce the damage from the foe's first attack by 50%. This helps especially with dragons and close counter mages, and foe can't make a follow-up attack. This is saving you the effort of running impact on the infantry Ephraim, and of course the Cav Emblem legendary Ephraim can't run an impact skill anyway, so stopping foe's follow-up attack is very handy and will save you a lot of trouble if your 2 hits aren't enough to kill already, or if they have no follow-up. Well, the 50% will help you there at least. But yeah, I've gone on a little while about these two, but there are 2 units to cover. If you're an Ephraim fan, I hope you're looking forward to this Refine, and hopefully they'll get something. Hopefully it'll be just as nice as his legendary remix. Hopefully it'll be something that works with it, unlike what happened to Fjorm the other time. That was quite funny. But yeah, tell me what you think in the comments, by the way, about these Refines and what you might choose instead. I'm always interested to see what people have to say. Now last and, well, probably least, we have legendary Lyn. And she's been quite the infamous character throughout Fire Emblem Heroes, or at least her existence in it. She introduced the coloured bows, so she was the first coloured bow to exist in FEH, so she's very experimental. It was around the time that Lyn and Lucina were getting quite a lot of ults, and Camilla, so Lyn was on the end of some controversial, perhaps aggressive comments from people. She was never that amazing when she first came out, but that's probably because no one really wanted to invest in her. But the people that did often came up with distant defense type builds that ditched her ace skill and went with her mixed bulk and good speed and worked with Swift Muller gear. Her remix, however, breathed a little bit of new light into her with Laws of Saccade 2, which is 6 to all stats with a really easy condition. It also gives her a fire sweep effect, which is really nice. You just have to make sure your speed's a good bit higher, which is why she has joint drive speed. Joint drive speed is very generous because it also gives all those people that got legendary Lyn by accident during the infamous Hero Rises event of, was it 2019? I think it was, where everyone got one of 4 units for free, some fodder that they could work with if they still hung on to their legendary Lyn. A lot of a mouthful there, but in other words, Lyn had a bit of a bumpy ride, at least with this ult. So her remix gave her ability to be relevant, but nothing that stands out above other good archers. And when you compare to someone like Shamir, who's been on, I think, 2 Hero Fests now, people that have her are probably a little bit more better off still. But here's the thing, Lyn hasn't had a refine yet, and she's about to get one. So on the right there, I gave her a Blazing Wind set. It actually works quite well because of her Fire Sweep. So she can use 2 hits to charge Blazing Wind, and then every time she uses it, it should be pre-charged again for the next round. So that's quite nice. Simple, cool build there. But I suppose the only problem is that she's only got 52 visible attack. I've only just noticed that now. Probably not the best thing to give her. But the refine is what I'm hoping will give her something that, I don't know, makes her worth summoning for as a legendary hero, rather than what would feel more like a 4-star special with a special name. So I gave her grants attack speed +3 rather than res +3. Res +3 is very outdated for her now because she wants to make use of that Fire Sweep player phase effect. But it can also work for enemy phase too anyway. Reminds me a bit of what Ira got for her refine, which was rather good. If unit is not adjacent to an ally, grants attack speed +5 during combat. That's again a simple check that works perfectly fine, perfectly well with the rest of her kit. If unit initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally and unit speed's higher, yeah, I basically gave her Flashing Blade 4. I mean, Flashing Blade 4 boosts her damage and it boosts her special cooldown, which is something that her other skills don't do. So if you combine this with her Fire Sweep, with her 6 to all stats, with her Joint Drive speed, you end up with a really, really strong player phase character who still has a Sacred Seal slot and B slot free for anything you wish. This could be anything from a lull skill, Special Spiral, Null Sea Disrupt, Null Follow Up, and in the Sacred Seal you could run attack speed solo just to completely blitz the opponent with attack and speed. There's a lot that can be done here. So while Lyn's one of the more controversial units in the game, I think there's a lot of potential for her to be good and better with this refine, and I just hope that they do something interesting with it, really. But yeah. And that brings me to the end of the video. I hope you all found this interesting and perhaps learnt a bit more about the potential some of these units have. Personally, I'm quite excited for the Choose Your Legends characters because I feel like they were a batch of Choose Your Legends characters that were perhaps a little bit underpowered at launch, and they faded away very quickly, in my opinion. The year before with Hexer and such did so much better, I think, at standing the test of time. So it'll be nice to see what the refines can do for them. But yeah, tell me in the comments who you're most excited about. What do you think of the ideas I gave them? What you might think they'll get yourself, you know? What would you give them if you were to make them stronger? Feel free also to share with me any build ideas you have about the characters, either before or after they release. And yeah, I hope to see you all in the next video. I'm going to make another video soon on the state of refines, separate this time from the update, so that I can just delve into the patterns and basically just have a ramble about how refines are going. So feel free to watch that as well. And yeah, I hope you're all staying safe and are well, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.